welcome. It's a good group here this evening. I want to start out just by welcoming you and kind of tell you a little bit about why we're here. For you guys that are online and any of you that may be new. There's a book called 4 Pillars of a Man's Heart by Stu Weber. And in the introduction, he says, I'm reminded again that the only thing that lasts will in fact populate eternity is people. Wooden walls will crumble, stone pillars will fall, but people are forever. And if life is to mean anything, building people must be what it's all about. As someone has said, you can't do much about your ancestors, but you can your descendants. We've got to build a family that outlives us. We've got to build a home that outlasts us. We've got to build a heritage that stands strong and firm in the winds of time. We've got to build a civilization that doesn't fall apart with the passing years. We've got to build a civilization on pillars that will not lean or crumble. What kind of man builds a civilization? A small civilization that outlasts him? What kind of a man has shoulders broad enough to build upon? A 4-pillared man. A man of vision and character. A king. A man of strength and power. A warrior. A man of faith and wisdom. A mentor. A man of heart and love. A friend. It's upon these pillars, the 4 pillars of manhood, that the small civilization we call home will either stand or fall. You can't support a roof, keep out the elements, and shield against things that go bump in the night with only 1 or 2 pillars. 3 pillars might hold up a roof for a while, but the structure's out of balance and always in danger of collapsing. It takes 4 pillars to hold up a building, a temple, a home. It takes 4 pillars to make a man who will bear the weight, stand against the elements, and hold one small civilization intact in a world that would like nothing better than to tear it down. You know, our culture, our society is full of many influences that really seek to undermine our families and tear down that small civilization that we call home. And that's why we need men. We need men who are strong and courageous. And that's what this ministry is about. We're here to encourage one another, to lift one another up. If our pillars get out of plumb, then we can push each other, help each other stand tall and stand straight and stand against the elements. But in addition to having strong pillars, you also have to have a strong foundation. So the other aspect of what we want to accomplish here is in conjunction with the church, we want to have that foundation of Jesus Christ upon which those pillars stand. That's what we're about, what this ministry is about. So we're glad you're here, either present or online. Hope that you will, in the future, invite friends and neighbors to come and join us. They don't even have to go to our church. So anyway, we're going to kick off this year with 2 speakers. First will be Jared, yes. There was so many Jareds in the room. I started saying, I almost called you by your kid's name, so. Okay, the U.S. version, okay. So Jared Musgrove was, at one time, he was the education minister here at Normandale. Some of you that have been here a while may remember him. Since then, he is at the Village Church doing all kinds of things, and he'll tell you about that in just a second. And then secondly, we will have one of our own homegrown guys here. David Kenner's going to come up and also add to the discussion of coping with depression. It's an issue that is real. It can be medical. It can be psychological. It can be influenced by external things as well as internal things, and it's a real thing, and it's something that as men we oftentimes don't talk about, but it's something that we need to talk about because we need to deal with it, because it can inhibit our ability to be those pillars for our families that they need us to be. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jared, the U.S. version of Jared.
Really cool to stand with you guys. I'm having a memory. I think the last time I stood up here, we were saying goodbye, and you guys gave me an iPad, which had only been out for 3 months at that point. So it was Gen 1, and I still have it. I kept that because, I mean, that was an amazing gift to get. In fact, you don't get gifts like that from churches. So this church in its generosity, I mean, I was telling Justin over here, it's like we have so many good foundational memories here in this church and with some of you guys. So pretty fun to be here tonight. All right, depression. What Paul said, it is real, and the enemy uses it to take you off the field. So here's what I'm handling tonight. I'm doing spiritual depression, which is very, very real. It is a tool of the enemy. It's like, hey, there's a book about it by Martin Lloyd-Jones that I'll cite a little later. But there is an aspect of depression that does have to do with your core, with your soul. And then David is going to come up here and talk about a just as real part of depression that really does have a lot to do with your body. I mean, that's how God made us. We are body, mind, and soul. So we minister to whole human beings. And so we're going to try to at least kind of get around that prism a little bit tonight. All right, so what is spiritual depression? It is an issue of wholeness, spiritual depression. It's an issue of wholeness or something lacking in the core of a man. And it can make you feel like something is just missing. And so over here on the left side of the slide, I define it a little bit the way Martin Lloyd-Jones does. Large numbers of Christian people just feel unfulfilled, unhappy, not joyful. It's just kind of gray. They're cast down and their souls are disquieted within them. He goes on to say this over in the top right quadrant. Spiritual depression is brought on by a lack of balance in mind, heart, strength, and soul. And it is one of the most fruitful causes of trouble and discord and disquietude in the life of the Christian man. I want to start here tonight, when we're talking about spiritual depression, with how God tells us in His Word that we function spiritually. That's in Deuteronomy 6 and Mark 12. These aspects of who we are as men. Deuteronomy 6, you may know this. It's called the Shema in the Old Testament. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Kind of these aspects, these whole aspects of who you are as a man. Completely rounded out man of God. This is how you're to love God, with these different aspects of who you are. And then in Mark 12, Jesus also teaches this. He says, someone comes to him and says, what's the greatest commandment, teacher? And he says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And in that, Jesus doubles down, because he is God, he can do it. He tells us exactly, this is how I've made you and formed you. This is what holism means. And when something's not whole, something's going to feel off. We're going to call that spiritual depression. And we're going to try and at least get to some of the symptoms of it tonight, and maybe even how we're made to give that kind of insight so you can get in and do the work so that when something spiritually feels off, you might even be able to point to our graph that we're going to do here in just a minute and kind of go, it's just kind of here, or oh my gosh, that's where it's coming from. So if we can have the next slide, Danny, we'll kind of get into some of this. It does build off of each other. Let's go ahead and start here in that gray section. So here's how Jesus tells us that we're made up. We are mind, strength, heart, and soul. This is just kind of a graph I've made for how we think about the holism of being human beings. So there's the mind. In Hebrew, it's called the lave. In Greek, it's called the Dionysus. It's probably what you think it is, a little bit. We tend to think of the mind as like he's kind of like a real smart guy. It's sort of like that, but it's even deeper. It's not just that, hey, he can recall facts or he knows a lot of things. It's the seat of understanding and emotion. These things fuse together. It's not just pure logic, so don't think like Mr. Spock kind of mind here. The Hebrew idea is of like, this is a person who fully understands things. And it is an aspect of how we're made up as men, kind of where we contemplate. But we also have this aspect of strength. That's kind of this red version of our circle. And what that is in Hebrew is it's actually not a thing. It's not like, your muscle or your physical strength. It's actually used in the language in both Old and New Testament as it's an adverb. It's a modifier. It can only move if there's something behind it. Like it moves the thing that is coming. And so what it means is like you're absolutely. Love the Lord your God with all your very is literally what that means. But it is an aspect. It's the part of men that gets us up and going. It's what helps us take action. But we can't do any of it without the heart, which is this bottom purple sector. And it's the same word in Hebrew as mind, lave. So ancient Hebrews would not have this idea of, there's a separation between head and heart. That was not a concept for them. So it's so important. The reason we chose a circle to do this is because you've got to see that these things interact together as a man. It's not quite like a waffle or like a game board or something like a quadrant. It's like this stuff swirls together. It's how you're made up. And it's important for understanding how you're made up of as a man if you start to kind of understand what's going on inside of you spiritually. But the heart is the lave. In a sense, it's also the seat of understanding and emotion. In Hebrew thought, you would not have separated the two. It's where you feel things. It's where you contemplate the deeper things. Relationships, both with God and with one another. But then in the center, in the core of all of it, is your soul. Now in Hebrew, this is called the nephesh. You know what that word means? It means throat. This is the same word that David uses in Psalm 42 when he says, I thirst and pant to know God. Where can I go and meet with God? It's like the throat. My nephesh yearns for you. My soul longs for you. It's like, in a sense, like I'm parched in my throat. If you think about it, that's really kind of the center. That's the entry point of the body. Like anything that's going to get down here, it's pretty much got to go through there. It's one of the narrowest paths in your body. It's also one of the most vulnerable. Like think, you get punched in the throat, you're going down. That's important to understand. This is the soul is central. In both Hebrew, New Testament, and Christian thought. It's like, this is where the enemy is going to attack. And if he's getting after your soul, after your nephesh, if he punches you in the throat, or if something's not going right here, it's going to affect mind and strength and heart, some of those more outward things, how we interact with people. So it all comes from that. And apart from a spirit-led life, this is also on the slide, apart from a spirit-led life and community, there can be no stable core, no stable nephesh. And what happens is a split will occur in the life of a man. With an unstable core, think of it as tree rot. It starts here in the core. You can't see it at first because the outside looks okay. But what will happen to that tree if the rot goes untreated from the core? The tree will eventually split. And then it'll be revealed what the problem was. We see this all the time. The fallen American pastor is our favorite, one of our favorite characters in media. It's like, oh my gosh, everything looked like it was going so well, but the nephesh, something was off in the soul. And I'm tired of Satan taking out our men doing that. So just understand where he's going to attack. He's going to go for the throat. He's going to go for the nephesh. And what this split can do, and his trick for you, and this is spiritual depression, is he'll usually split you one or two ways. One will be this bottom right, or it's your left, quadrant, or half. And that's what I'll just call the shadow self or the rebel. So the split that you may make is one of shame. You may, as a man, kind of go back and go, well, gosh, I've had this happen to me, and I've made these mistakes, and it's one of retreat. It's one of shame. We'll call it the shadow self. And it retreats in shame. It might be a rebel, maybe a quiet rebel, but it'll just go like, yeah, I'm not going to be a part of anything that goes on over there. I've been hurt enough by church, I don't need that. So it will withdraw. Or it might split in this way. Again, no solid core. no hope for wholeness. It may split toward an ideal self, a projected self. This is kind of the achiever guy. He'll come in and tell you everything he's done, every accolade he's had since high school, and it's a projected self. It's like not a real person. You ever met someone like this? Can you recognize it in yourself? It's like something's off in the core. Something's off in the core. There is a spiritual depression. There's a lack happening. A couple of pictures here for you. I already talked about tree rot. Next slide, Danny. That's what it looks like. A tree splits because that rot gets in there, in the soul, and it just rots it out from the inside out. Looks okay on the outside, but that tree is eventually going to break. Next slide. Can anyone tell me what this is? Cross-section of a seed. Okay? So what has to happen biblically and agriculturally for a seed to bear fruit? Yeah. Jesus talks about this in John 12. A seed must fall to the ground and die. And you know what happens? It breaks open. And what is in the center, what is in the core, is what gives life. So the outer shell has to be broken down. If you look back at that circle, that outer shell, the things that we're either projecting or hiding from, have to be broken down. We have to get down into the core. This is getting to the heart of spiritual depression, or the soul of it, really. And so that seed has to be broken, and the life of the seed has to be activated. What is truly life-giving about the seed and about a man? It's your soul. Out of a full core, you can give life. But if you're rotted out, you have no life to give. You'll either be a dead stump, kind of like shadow self, withdrawn, or you'll take life as a projected self. But you're depressed either way. Next slide, Danny. Can anyone tell me what this is? It's a bone. It's a cross-section of a human bone. I think it's a femur, if I remember correctly. What goes there in that center, in that core of the bone? Marrow. It's usually filled with something. See, that ought to be filled with something. And what are we told that Scripture does? What does it penetrate to? Come on, Hebrews. Penetrates to bone and marrow, like down to the deepest part. So here's what God wants to do if you're feeling spiritually depressed. You meet men that you're just going, something's just off here. Here's what God wants to do. He wants to perform that kind of spiritual surgery. Not just deal with the outer part of it or the projected part. He goes for the nephesh. He goes for the marrow. And these are just wonderful pictures from nature that God gives us to kind of get an idea of how we're made up. And so yeah, Hebrews 4, it says he goes and does spiritual surgery. Because sometimes I've created an entire personality out of what I think someone wants, projected self, or what I think I'm not, which is a shadow self. And either one is not living wholly before God, and that leads to spiritual depression. Let's just call it what it is, unhappiness. You go home and you don't feel like you're whole. You're like this bone. It's like there's no marrow, there's no meat to this man. But men with a soul after God have something to give. They are full. Next slide, Danny. Just going to keep throwing these images at you guys. Okay, what's this a cross-section of? It's an eyeball. What is the center of the eyeball? Asking a lot of medical questions. What's like right there? Pupil, okay? Yeah, iris, like right there. You know what God calls it? In Psalm 17, it says that he sees you as the apple of his eye. You know what that is? It's like, that's that cornea right in there. It's the central part, right there in the center. It's the core of the eye. And without it, there's no sight. Everything around that eye supports that cornea, seeing. What happens if that cornea goes out? No sight. It affects the entire body. These are the metaphors that Scripture gives you to kind of deal with what we're going to call spiritual depression. So God calls you the apple of his eye, and if he loves you, and this is where he'll kind of bring to light that something's off with you, it's spiritual depression one way or another. It's like, something's off, Lord. You've called me the apple of your eye. Would you do LASIK on my eye so that I can see myself before you rightly? Okay. So next slide, Danny. Trying to remember. Okay. So here's where it is. A couple of statements for you. There can be no significant transformation in a man apart from another man or other men. So you men are taking this on here, and I've sat in enough of these groups to know that, like, what you're doing tonight, sometimes it's hard to get up and come to. Just know this. Somebody is likely here or will be here or has been here, and this has been a lifeline. This has been that soul lifeline. It has kept them from depression. I've been parts of small groups, one small group in particular. We had a single guy in there. He never talked. Honestly, he was just really hard to deal with. It's like I would look at him and say, he's kind of depressed. He's kind of a downer. What he shared with us after coming to small group for a year, he just started to open up. So again, like, we'd been with him for a while. And honestly, in my own heart, I kind of just begun to tolerate him. He said, you guys have no idea what it takes for me to come to this small group, because every time I'm making a decision, am I going to come here or am I going to look at porn tonight? He goes, you guys have been my lifeline. It's like, I know I can come here and I don't have to live that way. Like, that's the kind of soul transformation that groups like this can be. That's why I do what I do. That's why you're here. You are battling against the kind of spiritual depression that leads to shame, slinking away in the shadows, and also leads to just like pride and arrogance and disunity in the body. So that's what's happening here. That's kind of fighting back against spiritual depression. That's making whole men, because you cannot bypass the messiness of relationships, of trust, if you hope to penetrate to the core. So that's the next step. And I'll kind of get into some of what David's talking about, because whether you're going like, I just feel spiritually off, or there might be something off here, and he's going to give you some diagnostics kind of physically. If something's off, here's the next scary step: to actually share it. So if something hits tonight, here's the challenge, and here's the moment of courage. Is not just to write it down in your notebook and go, man, I'm glad I've got that for when I got to help that guy. And you go home and you just you shelve it and you sit down, maybe next to the person you're sharing your life with, and you never talk about it. That's actually how the enemy isolates men. It's how he keeps you living that shadow self, or living the projected self that's not even really you, and it's certainly not you before God. So you cannot bypass the messiness of relationships, of trust, if you hope to get to your core and to the core of other men. You're setting the stage for you tonight, and I'm grateful for that. There's no hope to heal the core or spiritual depression apart from community. So sometimes just showing up and having the place for other guys to show up is the start. I think back to David, in our home group just a couple of years ago. He just goes, gosh, guys, that was the lifeline. That's why these are tethered together, is you've got to have that connection to one another. That soul connection, saying, listen, we've got the greatest commonality in common. We both follow the King of the universe. And we're brand new creations in him, and we're eternal beings that are going to spend eternity with the King of everything, and we're going to have fully restored bodies, and it's going to be amazing. And yet, so why is this so boring? It can't be. There's so much potential in this room, around these tables, for healing to happen in the core, in the nephesh. Because your personality left on its own can restrict the Holy Spirit. You can listen to lies over here in isolation. Or you can just propagate your own lies out here if you're the achiever type with the projected. But either way, it's a spiritual depression. Like, think about that word picture of a depression. What is that? It's like a sinkhole. Like, literally, that's what's happening in your soul without other significant relationships of trust among men. Being able to share, like, this is where I'm struggling. This is where I'm at with the Lord, or this is where I'd like to be with the Lord. It starts with confession to him and to one another. So think about how David prayed, and then I'm going to end and invite David up here. David didn't go to God and say, God, I'm really terrible, and I did it again, and I'm really awful. It's like, do you see the shadow self there? It's just continuing to kind of lob it on, which is a certain kind of pride. David goes before God and says, God, because of your mercy, cleanse me of my sin. Fill my lips with your words. Do you see the proactivity, the relationship with God, with David? Because that's the first relationship of trust that has to exist, is you and God. But you men can image that to one another and to other men. And that's where the healing can begin. I've seen it over and over, and that's why I've given my life to groups, men's, leader development, all of that, because I really believe, and it's the only thing I've seen that can really get at the causes and be a hope for a cure for spiritual depression, to heal that core. All right. Dave is going to come up, and I'm actually excited. I told him this before. I'm looking forward to learning something because I sit with men a lot. And what I'll say here is just from a pastor, I'm grateful for what David's about to share with you, because sometimes something can feel off and you just can't quite get at it. And you might need to have something bodily happen. There may need to be a clinical approach to get some clarity so that we can deal with issues of the core.
I might need to walk around. So just to let you know, I got to pick up my son from basketball practice by around 8:40. So if I go over at 8:25, y'all better signal me because he'll be left there by himself. Just to let you know where I'm coming from, I'm a clinical nurse specialist by trade. A lot of my clinical experience is from nursing home. So when we talk about depression, it's from a captive audience of people that live in a certain place. The environment is depressing, but they already have a lot of things going on. So that's my experience. They're week in and week out, I'm seeing them. And I don't do this right now, but that's what my experience comes from. So it's a captive audience, and we got to really see them week in and week out. We'd start stuff, we'd try different things, they'd go to counseling, we'd start a new medicine, and we'd get to see that captive audience and see how they improved or how they didn't improve and talk to the therapist. So fairly unique aspect. And also at 28, I was telling Jared, many of you know at 28, I went through pretty weird viral illness where it messed up my stomach and I lost like 40 pounds, if you can believe it or not. And at that time, I went through depression because I was just sick as a dog, and then it went to my mind, and I was depressed for a good 6 months to a year. So you'll hear a little bit of that coming out in it too, because I'll say, well, I definitely felt that way, or I have my own experience. So you might hear a little bit of that coming out. So that's where I'm coming from, the clinical nursing home experience. I can't say enough about what Jared said while I'm sitting there in the nursing home talking to someone that's completely depressed. And I'm sitting here going, okay, let's try this. Let's increase the dose. I'm sitting here thinking this is, I'm going to leave here praying for them because spiritually there's something going on here. And to be on the medicine side and the spiritual side, it's both and all and sometimes. Danny, can you put my slides up there? Because a lot of them are boring, and I'm just going to pick out little things here and there. But I'm going to start off with some statistics 5% of ages 18 and older experience feelings of regular depression. So 5%, I was a little shocked. I thought that was a little low. 10% of people going to the doctor's office regular, they have depression on their medical record. So 10% of everyone at the doctor's office, they have depression on their medical record. 11% of people going into the ER have depression on their medical record. And then this one was a little eye-opening. About 48,000 people die from suicide every year in the U.S., and that's about 14.5 people per 100,000 population. But can you guess, there's a percentage here for a certain person. 70% of this person makes up all of that suicide. I mean, and it's applicable to us. Middle-aged white man is 70% of all the suicide in America. That was shocking to me that middle-aged white man is 70% of suicide. More common in women than men, depression, not suicide. Why do you think that is? We as men, we don't run to the doctor. We don't run and want to talk about we're depressed. Women typically may run to the doctor and may talk to people and open up and seek treatment first. So, and that's not just depression. That's typically everything. Heart, legs, something going on. You know, we're not running to the doctor right away. Women typically are. So sometimes we have worse statistics because we're stubborn. And then the most prevalent age, I just said suicide is a white middle-aged man, but for depression, the most prevalent age is 18 to 25. That's not too far off of me. It was 28 when I went through depression. And it's just interesting to think about. You're so young, that's when you should be starting off excited, but that's the most prevalent age. And then 7% of all U.S. adults had at least one major depressive episode. So I hope I'm done with that at 28. I hope I never get depressed again because I had my one episode. I'm falling that 7%. And I'm speaking for my wife. Ashley also, after a miscarriage, because we'll talk about hormones, she went through a bout of depression. So both of us have gone through that and been in that 7% where we've had one major depressive episode. All right, Danny, you can go to the next page. And this is where I'm going to sit mostly. The rest of the slides we'll just kind of breeze through. But I think this one's the most interesting. So clinically, with the research and what's going on, these are the reasons or causes for depressions and the risk factors that you'll put you at risk for having depression. Physical changes to the brain. You have a less active frontal lobe. Just part of your brain is different. It's less active, more active. It's less active, but you have that biological predisposition to getting depressed. And I remember so I was one of the ones that went to counseling for when I had depression. And I remember the counselor telling me, and this stuck in my mind and it kind of jogged my memory. She said, if you don't get treated or the longer this goes untreated, because as a nurse, I don't want to take any medicine. I don't take aspirin. That's just me. I don't want to do that. That's just my choice. But she was saying maybe you should consider an antidepressant. And I said, no, not going to do that. Not going to go on an antidepressant. Don't need that. And that's just me being stubborn. I don't want to do that. She said the research says the longer you stay depressed, the more there's changes to your brain. And research shows later on, you're more predisposed to get dementia or have problems later on with your brain. And that really stuck with me because it scared me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to continue counseling and hope that I can get pulled out of this black, dark abyss. And by the grace of God, I did get pulled out of that abyss and didn't have to start it. But we will talk about treatment and what that's like from a medicine standpoint. Brain chemistry, this is my favorite one because this can be a depressing talk, but I found some things that were a little bit kind of exciting and new. So there's 4 different things that I wrote down that are kind of chemicals, neurotransmitters. One of them is endorphins. So I was thinking of actually Mason today when I was thinking of endorphins, because he was just talking about 28-mile bike ride. And if you're not going to get an endorphin, or it's runners and marathon people that get those endorphins in their brain, and that's one of them. Endorphins, you can get that runner's high, you can get that going. That's a good feeling in your mind, and actually it's a painkiller. It's a natural painkiller. So if you ever think of marathon runners, they don't have any pain when they're running, but when they stop, everything feels bad. That's because they got the endorphins running. So maybe if you're going, you're like, I'm feeling good, and then I don't know, maybe you don't, but you probably got endorphins circulating around. The other thing with endorphins, laughing. Dark chocolate was on here for those of you that have made fun of me for eating dark chocolate. That's something, and all of these things I'm going to talk about in a way kind of lifting mood. But then I'll hit on one that really is the culprit for depression. Oxytocin. You think of that, probably some of you husbands that have been in labor room, they start the Pitocin to try to start labor. This is a similar one, oxytocin. It's when it's mom's breastfeeding or actually with her baby. It's like a feel-good, lovey hormone. Kissing, bonding, love, trust. That's why a lot of this, I was making references, Jared, to yours. When you're alone and you're out, and you can think COVID, you can think non-life group, non-community, there's some hormones that are actually not circulating. But when you are bonding, loving, grouped together, you're with your spouse, you're with kids, hormones are actually getting released. Oxytocin is one of them. So I say all these things so that you can just be aware and actually make a clinical case for some of what biblically we know and what we know as community and what we should do. One of them, besides oxytocin that I wrote down just because I thought it was funny, it's kind of caused a little bit of trouble in our marriage. There's a hormone called relaxin, just like it sounds, relaxin. And when a mom feeds her baby, breastfeeds her baby, her body secretes relaxin. And I've always been told that's why a woman is not just on the ground with tiredness when they're breastfeeding. They actually get really relaxed and calm, and their baby could be screaming off the hook, but they're pretty relaxed and they're doing all that. And I've always joked with Ashley, she's like, why don't you get up tonight? I'm like, I don't have the relaxin. You're the one that's got relaxin, so I'm gonna get tired. You're not, you're gonna be relaxed. I just thought that was a funny one. She didn't buy that, but it is true. There's all these hormones that have things that are released from your brain. Dopamine, this is a good one too, because I wanted to throw caffeine in here. Caffeine, oddly enough, can do some stuff. It's actually a stimulant, so you're typically not going to be depressed if you're down in the caffeine. It's going to keep you going. It's going to keep you moving, just like other caffeinated things. But if you stop it, caffeine likes to get the dopamine going, and you feel pretty good. It's a risk-reward. You value that cup of coffee in the morning. It actually releases dopamine just thinking about it because it's kind of that reward. You pick it up and dopamine's already getting released. And then you check it down and dopamine's getting released. But now you say you're going to stop coffee. You better be prepared to feel really down and sluggish and tired. Maybe depressed. Maybe the kickoff of a depression if you're going to do that. So wean off of it. It is a stimulant. We will talk about, alcohol's on here, drugs are on here, uppers, downers, stimulants. Alcohol is a depressant. It will bring you down. It will get you in the blues. Caffeine's going to lift you up. So I'm not going to say go enjoy caffeine. I don't drink caffeine. My wife loves caffeine, coffee, but it is a dopamine. Releases dopamine, makes you feel good. The one that I want to stop on is serotonin. This is the main one for depression, the main neurotransmitter. It's your overall well-being. You feel good, you feel stable. It's a mood stabilizer. So people with depression, their mood it's not stabilized. They're missing that serotonin. You're typically happy if you have an adequate supply of serotonin. And something interesting, I don't remember where I learned it or if it was a professor or someone said, but I really took that to heart too, because I thought, oh gosh, sometimes this is me, and especially as a teenager or in my 20s, younger 20s, I drive around 120 degree and, no AC, just hot. And I was getting, I would just stay hot. I liked the windows down. That was just me. And the professor said, heat sucks the serotonin out of you. It just dissipates serotonin. So you think about that. If you're out in the hot, do you get pretty snappy? Are you all warm and fuzzy and things are good? Like, it just sucks the serotonin out of you. So I started closing up my windows in the summer and trying to turn on, and that's just me being weird about clinical or medical stuff and being like, I'm not going to get that serotonin sucked away from me. I need to keep my happy hormones. I can't let that go away. So those are kind of the fun ones. Lots of different things that you put into your body, caffeine, heat, things that you may not be aware of could be triggering moods or changes or different things. Time of the year also. Hormones, this is a big one. Menopause for women. There's such a thing as menopause for men. Your testosterone goes down, and that's one of the hormones that keeps you fairly content. So later on in life, you may notice that you're not having as good of a mood or as good as you used to feel. So there are those things. Thyroid, you hit 40s or maybe 50s, and you think, what's wrong with me? I'm gaining a lot of weight. And typically, I see this more in women. Men too, though. You get your thyroid tested, and they're like, yeah, you don't have much thyroid. Here's your synthroid. That's going to make you feel better because your hormones were off. Some of these things, people get depressed and they get a lot of tests run to see if they're missing some of these hormones. And sometimes that is the reason. And sometimes it's a clinical reason that something's missing or something's gone downhill. Postpartum, that was kind of Ashley's thing. Not necessarily postpartum, but when you carry a baby and then you lose the baby, your hormones are like this, and they continue to cycle like that for months because your body's confused on what just happened. So just be aware, those types of things, they do lead down or kick off depression, potentially. If your parents were depressed, you have a line of people that suffer with depression, that could be setting you up for some of those things through genes and those types of things. Early childhood trauma, your brain had a pattern of how it dealt with things early on in life or midlife, or it just changed a little bit, you may have a predisposition to that. And then medical conditions, this one is a really big one, and every professor I've ever listened to that was talking about chronic illness or looking at care holistically has always said someone that's had a stroke, someone that's got a new diagnosis of cancer, CHF, COPD, something major just hit them, and you deliver that news. You're going to want to start an antidepressant for them. They're not going to want it, but you're going to say, you've been hit with some bad news. This is new for you. They're going to need it. That's a major change for them, and it's going to, you may only need it situationally for a little bit, and you can take it off, but that's just word to the wise. People are going to really think about, my body's changed, my life has changed, and they're going to feel a little bit different, and it could lead them into depression. So just be aware of that. If you have something or you know of someone, think of their mind. Think of them going down a road just because of a new diagnosis. Not sleeping well, you have to sleep well. You cannot go without sleep. If you do, your brain's going to suffer for it, and it's going to lead you possibly into depression. And in chronic pain, if you're in pain and it's nagging at you and it's sucking away your joy, that's also going to potentially kick you off into a depression. May not, but untreated severe pain, you're not going to have all these happy hormones floating around. You're going to be down, you're going to be sad. And then I talked about drug and alcohol use. before I go off this slide, one last thing. I was just doing some reading today. Your outlook on life, if you have low self-esteem or you consider yourself having low self-esteem, you're a perfectionist, you're a people pleaser, you have a lot of guilt, you live with regrets, those are a couple of things that you may be more at risk for depression. There was a study done with some monkeys. I thought this was a funny study. I told Ashley about it. So these monkeys, some of them had really high confidence level. They go after the food and like leave the other ones like out and about, and they were just like sitting there sulking that they didn't get any food. They tested the hormones. The monkeys that got the food, they were happy and like kept getting happier and kept getting happier. The monkeys that kept getting kind of passed over, it's almost in a way like their self-esteem just kept going down. They kept getting further and further down and down and down. So I say that because they did a study on it, but it was about self-esteem and your outlook on life. And I was talking to Ashley about it because I'm pretty optimistic. Like she may say something, I'm like, no, that's, let's be optimistic here. And she's like, well, let's look at this side of it. I'm like, no, I don't want to look at that side of it. And so I was telling her in the hopes of saying, see, and she said, yeah, but you can't be like that. You can't be like that. You have to look at the side of it. So I just say that in case maybe you have a kid or a relative that has that outlook on life. It could be that they're predisposed to get down and go into a real depression over your people that are happy-go-lucky and they're okay with things. So some risk factors. This symptom slide, you can go to the next slide, Danny. It's, make sure I'm not going to leave Austin. Yeah, I got plenty of time. The symptom slide, symptoms can manifest in all different ways. I mean, my nursing home patients were just any of these. I mean, they were sad, they'd be crying. They'd be angry, they'd hit the nurse, they'd be irritable, they'd say, we're gonna put someone outside of all the other people, something's going on with them. Or I remember this one guy, he watched the Rangers game every single time, and they're like, he hadn't been watching the Rangers game, something's wrong, because that's the only thing he had in that nursing home was when the Rangers came on, that's what he would do. And those were triggers that, yeah, something needs to be done. He needs to talk to the counselor. We need to increase his medication. You lose interest. I mean, if you did watch the Rangers game and you find you don't care, sex, hobbies, sports, you fall off the map and you're like, none of that interests me anymore. I'm not interested in anything. That's getting into a depressed state. Sleeping. You sleep too much. You sleep too little. You can't sleep. And all these, there can be other reasons for it than depression. Maybe you need to turn your thermostat cooler so you can sleep. Tired, no energy. I remember feeling this one when I had depression. It was a monumental task to go somewhere and talk to someone. And that's hard to believe, but I did not want to leave the bed. I did not want to leave the bedroom. And I did not want to go talk to anyone. It took every ounce of energy to go do that. So someone that's depressed, it really, when they say they don't have any energy and they're tired, like they do. They don't want to go do anything. They can't. They just can't mount the energy to do it. It's that bad. Reduced appetite, weight loss, increased cravings, weight gain. I mean, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Losing lots of weight, gaining lots. For me, losing 40 pounds, I was eating a can of soup. I didn't have any nutrients to get to my brain. I got really depressed because I lost lots of weight because of medical conditions. So anxiety, agitation, slow thinking, feelings of worthlessness, can't concentrate. When I was at the seminary and I needed to drive to Ulen. I mean, it literally, I could ride my bike there. It was probably a 8-minute car ride, and I was depressed at that time. And I honestly remember coming home and telling Ashley, I could not concentrate to drive my car. I could not put it in gear and make it safely there and get into the lanes I needed to. I could not concentrate. That's why I could not finish seminary. I did not finish classes. I was sitting in class, listening to nothing, understanding nothing, barely making it from day to day. And that's how depression will suck you down. And someone who's completely functional in 6 months could be helpless, feeling like they have the ability to do nothing, and hopeless. I had just had Austin, my first son, and I did not care that I just had a new baby. I did not care that I was newly married. And that scared Ashley because she just married me. And she's like, who have I married? What in the world is going on? And I remember vaguely going through that, going like, this is not me. I'm sorry you don't know who I am. And that's where I was, and that's what it felt like. Trouble thinking, already did that one. Frequent thoughts of death, suicide, and then unexplained physical problems, back pains, different things start to creep up when you're not feeling good, and your hormones that make you feel good, you don't have those. So a lot of different symptoms can creep up and manifest differently. I'm not going to say my experience is the same for everyone else. You can go to the next slide, Danny. There's lots of depression tools out there. If you can Google, depression scale, depression tools, you can look at those things. They'll all kind of say the same thing. There's some geriatric depression scales for older people. There's some PHQ-9 general depression scales, tools. But mainly, you need to have symptoms for at least 2 weeks. It can't be because of a simple bereavement or a substance going on right there. It needs to be a clinically significant or distressing impairment. And what's really most important is that bottom group there. You have to have, for a depression diagnosis, 5 of the following must apply. You need to have the first one. You need to be depressed most of the day, nearly every day. And then maybe your sleep, maybe you have feelings, maybe it's your concentration, weight gain, you're not interested in things. You need to have 5 of those to really be depressed. I mean, I don't think a doctor's going to turn you away if you don't. If you say, I feel down, I feel depressed, they're probably going to put you on something. They're not going to ask you, oh, do you have this? Do you have this? I mean, they're just going to take you at your word that you're feeling down. But there are those tools out there, and we used them for our nursing home patients just to see kind of the severity of it, because you can do that too. So just a couple of more slides. These last ones are on treatment. And I thought this was somewhat interesting. The top portion is over 18. So typical adult, 35% of people are not going to get treatment. They're just going to say, I don't need counseling, I don't need depression, I don't need an antidepressant, I'm going to be able to pull out of this. That was me for a good while. I did not want to. It's the stigma of starting something and starting a medication, that means I'm like depressed, and that means I'm on a medicine, and I don't like medicines. I don't want to take medicine. Same thing with Ashley. Not taking medicine, that's a big thing for most people. To get on an antidepressant is a big thing. Health profession alone, 15%. That's where I ended up going, and that's what Ashley ended up doing. We sought out counselors, and that was our first step. We wanted the counselors to guide us, to tell us how bad it was or what we could do to get out of it. And I think I just went from someone at work, I can't remember, I didn't find it all that helpful. They told me to read some stuff, and I just described how I had no energy to even get out of the bed. I was like, I'm not going to read anything. I didn't tell the counselor that, but that's how I felt. I was like, that's great advice. Like, I'm not going to read anything. Ashley went to a Christian counselor up the road. What's the church? Up 30, just straight up 30, big church there on the north side. I don't know, but what is it? No, Christ Chapel. Yeah, that's where she went, and she found a really great lady really great. She was extremely, I wish I had had that experience because she really walked Ashley through it, and she was happy and she felt like she had a lot of good conversation, and she really pulled out of it. But most people, it looks like, over 18, 44% use medication and counseling together. Only 6% want to go into a doctor and say, give me something, without talking, without discussing it. So that's where that is. It's even lower in, I would say, kids, but I guess that's teenagers and, under 18. Only 2% get medication. Typically, a doctor's not going to just throw a person under 18 on a medication. But 60% don't get treated. Not a counselor, not a medication. That's pretty severe. And you saw the statistics for the ages of depression. So I put that there because I thought that was pretty. I don't know if that's parents, or I don't know if that's kids, or that's kids not telling their parents. But somewhere along the lines, they're not getting treated at that age. You can go to the next slide. So the good thing about it is there's some good things. There's some things to try. I totally did the exercise when I feel like exercise in general. I'm a nurse. Everyone should be exercising. Your veins, your arteries are gonna be stiff if you don't move. But that's what my go-to was. I thought, exercise, that's what's gonna save me. It's gonna pull me out. I couldn't get out of bed, but yet I remember going out. It was Carroll Park, seminary housing. It was that U that we lived in. I remember walking and forcing myself to walk up and down the Carroll Park housing because I had to feel better. I had to make myself feel better. So that is something. I did that with Ashley too. I was like, all right, I know you're feeling down. Let's go out. Let's go walk. Let's get moving. That's not what you want to hear, again, when you're depressed. But that's how cruel I am. I get things out there and get going. Alternative, fish oil. I was talking to this about Ashley. She's like, you never told me I could take fish oil. I was like, sorry, I didn't have it off top of mind. I'm just putting the study together and, writing some things. But fish oil, there's certain herbal, St. John's wort. I've taken fish oil off and on. I haven't done acupuncture. I've never done St. John's wort or any of those things, so I can't speak to them. And thus, the clinical nursing people, we don't do a lot of herbals. We don't know. You'll have to consult, other types of people for that. Light therapy, other people, light therapy. This is one that I really feel like is something. Seasonal affective disorder. You go into this time right now, February, and it's dark and it's cold. And I tell it to Ashley every year. I'm like, I hate after Christmas. It's like January, February, and then it's March before sun's coming out. This is me. I can get really affected by being cooped up, and with the weather bad, and with it being cold, I feel down. I feel depressed, and it's a thing. Seasonal affective disorder. They have things you can buy on Amazon, lights to put in your room so that you feel all bright and sunny and good. I don't do any of that stuff. I just try to go out on a sunny day. I will tell Ashley, I'm like, the sun's out. We're out. We're out today. We're not in the house on a sunny day on February or January. We're going to be out of the house. And then this right there, the therapist, I would say, if you ever feel down, first step, talk to someone, admit it, tell someone. But if you're really feeling down and you feel like you're getting sucked down into any of those things, see what your work has for you. For me, it was something they offered for free. A lot of workplaces give you free counseling. If not, there are places like Christ Chapel. They had free counselors. You had to sign up, but they called you and said, we got a spot open for you. And then you can pay for it too. It can be expensive, but if you can't find anyone, you need to go. Medications, antidepressants, almost all the antidepressants that people are using are for that serotonin. Remember I told you that was the hormone that keeps you stabilized? The Zolofts, all those, they're serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They basically stop you from, it lets your body have more floating serotonin. So basically you take your Zoloft, you're gonna have more serotonin in your body. And that's what they do. And the goal is to take it for a little bit of time. I don't know why I was freaking out, but you can take it for a few months. It takes a while to get going on it, but then you wean off. 1 minutes. Thank you for caring about Austin. Okay, all right. And then your I think this is my last slide. The next one's just a boring slide. Anti-anxiety medications if you're anxious, and antipsychotics, the big guns, the old medications that have a lot of side effects. That's not going to be what your doctor prescribes you, but there's those heavy-duty things that people have suffered with depression, and that's what they had in 1950 or 60 or 70, and that's what they're still on. So the next slide is just basically, you can't even read it, and it's mumbo jumbo, but that is what, that was the tool given to me when I was coding depression. That is what they said, here's how we will code depression. This digit is for this digit is for this is for mild recurrent, moderate recurrent, mild single, mild. So your doctor typically is coding all these things on your chart and judging you on your severity. So I wanted you to have the full picture of clinically, whenever you go in for depression, people are really caring about it and they're coding it to the nth degree, because next time you come in, they'll be like, oh yeah, that was mild, recurrent, moderate episode. You know, they know exactly what's going on with you. So I just add that in at the end just to let you know it's a real diagnosis with real treatment, nothing to be embarrassed of. Some of you have probably been on antidepressants and are on or off, and you may need them, but I'd put that on there to drive home the point of a doctor codes it, it's going to be on your chart, they're going to treat it, and when you're done, it's going to be off your medical record. They just take it off. It's gone. You don't have to deal with it, so it doesn't follow you forever. So that's my spiel. I'm going to have to go pick up my son, so I would love to chat, but I can't.
Okay, first off, huge thanks to David and Jared. And also huge thanks to Danny in the back for running that for us tonight. Okay, so I'll be quick here. I'm going to talk a little bit about discipleship groups and something new we're going to kick off tonight. And I wanted to just start with a couple of verses. I'm going to read out of Acts 2:42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and signs were being performed through the apostles. Now all the believers were together. Now all the believers were together and held all things in common. They sold their possessions and property and distributed the proceeds to all as they had need. Every day they devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple and broke bread from house to house. They ate their food with joyful and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Every day the Lord added to their numbers those who were being saved. So I wanted to start there just to kind of set our minds right before I talk about this and kind of have a picture of what we're shooting for here. Mason's talked a lot about discipleship groups lately, and we're trying to kind of push that as a church, and the man team is huge supporters of that. Many of us are in discipleship groups, and from the beginning we've had this sheet kind of when you walk in to sign up on. So a big part of discipleship groups, I think it's important that we don't assign those groups. I think that needs to happen a little more organically. You're meeting together, you're being accountable to one another, you're opening up to one another, So it kind of needs to be people that you trust, that you're comfortable meeting up with, especially if it's your first one, that kind of thing. So that's not something that we're assigning. So kind of the goal with this list is that you put your name down if you're interested, and you come, and if you feel confident in leading one, come find some people on here that you might want to reach out to and try to use this as a tool to start a group. So, this is not just a sign-in sheet, so use this as a tool if you can. Another thing that we are going to try to kick off in 2021 for our man team, we're stealing this from MOPS a little bit. I know, boo, MOPS, whatever, we're men. I think I'm contractually obligated to like MOPS, actually, so can't say that. But so I'm just going to read this so I don't miss anything, because I will if I go off the cuff. But we're going to introduce something called Soul Brothers. So each month we're going to randomly pair off with the people that are in the meetings. And the main goal here is to make sure that whoever you're paired up with, you're praying for throughout that month until the next month when we have a new meeting. Make sure you're intentional about this, you're praying for them, but then maybe if you can, go the extra mile. Try to exchange numbers before you leave here, text each other, call each other, maybe you meet up once a month or once a week or whatever you can do to get to know each other better. You can call each other and talk about, ask your brother what you could be praying for them for, what they're struggling with, what kind of burdens they're carrying that month, anything you can to get to know that person better. And kind of at the end of this, if we do this for all of 2021, you're going to have a full year, maybe 10 months, of 10 different people that you've intentionally prayed for that you wouldn't have otherwise. And I just think that's a really cool thing for us to do as men at the church. But also, try to just don't be discouraged if you can't go the extra mile. If all you're doing is praying, don't be discouraged by that. This is supposed to be kind of something we're trying to build one another up and not tear each other down. We don't want, if you get paired up with somebody that can't meet up, they can't do the extra stuff, don't be let down. Like pray for them, and that's, like I said, at the end of the year, you're going to have 10 different people that you've prayed for. So how I want to do this, I'm just going to kind of number everybody off. We've lost a couple. Let me see. 1, 16. So I'll number 8, and then 1 through 8, and then you find your partner. Casey, do you want to pair up with Jace maybe? Does that make sense? Is that good? Okay, cool. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Y'all with me? 6, 7. Matt, you're 7. Jared, you're 8. 1, Mason. 2, 3, 4. Jared, I'm gonna skip you. 5, 6. Danny, 7, and I'll be 8. So just find your partner after this. Did that make sense? Did everybody get a number? Okay. Find your partner after this and meet up and exchange phone numbers. And Jesus, I think, is online. There's a few people online. If y'all will kind of try to handle that and pair up, that'd be awesome. Let me pray for us, and then we'll dismiss. Dear Lord, I just thank you so much for all these guys here, and just ask that you would make yourself apparent in 2021, Lord, as we try to seek you and get to know you better, Lord, and as we try to lead our families and help lead this church, Lord. We just love you so much, Lord. Amen. Thank you all.